Hello everyone, welcome to Sevenoaks Campaigners Online. Today we're going to be looking at some experiments on flight. Well, actually we're going to be playing mainly with a very simple paper glider, and the idea is to see how you can adjust the glider to get the best out of it. We'll have a little go at helicopters and we'll end by making ice cream. Now, I know ice cream doesn't sound as though it's got very much to do with flying, but I'm thinking about it being the in-flight snack. So, before we set off with paper gliders, there is one word of warning. If you're going to be throwing paper planes around indoors, you need to be a little bit careful where you're going to throw them. You don't want to be throwing paper planes in places where there are delicate ornaments or things that are easily broken. So check first where you're going to try to fly your planes. Anyway, let's begin with making our simple paper glider. We begin by folding the paper in half. Now, when you're making these folds, the plane will do best if you make really sharp, accurate folds. So we fold the paper in half, and then you probably know about this. You put a bit of a point at each end by folding into that first fold. So one side like that, and then the other side needs to go across in the same way so that you get that. And then really we're only going to do one more fold on each side. So we fold from there so that this goes to the middle like that, and then make that a sharp fold, and then do the other side just the same. And we do need both sides to be as closely the same as we can make them. It's not quite identical on mine, but hopefully fairly close. So that was the folding really, and we're just going to add the wings by folding like that, and make the other wing as closely the same as you can. So just turn it over and fold it so that the two wings match against each other. And we've got our simple glider. And we're not going to do any more folds to make the plane. That's what we're after, because we're going to try to adjust this to make it do everything that we would like it to do. Before we go any further, we need to think about the forces that will act on our paper glider. As it happens, we were talking about these in our masterclass on forces, so if you've seen that, you'll know something about this already. When the glider is moving, there is gravity that will be trying to pull the glider down towards the earth, and the wings will be making some lift, which will be trying to keep the glider up in the air. And obviously we would like it to stay in the air as much as possible, so we want to get a good amount of lift. But as the glider is going forwards, there will be friction with the air, which we could call that drag, and that will be slowing the aeroplane down. Now, I have to say, as we mentioned in our masterclass, there is a lot of misinformation around. When a paper glider is going forwards and you've let go of it, there is no forward force on the glider. The only forces we have are gravity downwards, the lift on the wings upwards, and drag on the aeroplane. Once you've let go of the aeroplane, there isn't any forward force. Now, I say that because if you Google about paper gliders, you will come across a lot of sites which tell you that there is a forward thrust. And people seem to have the idea that even when you've let go of the aeroplane, there is still some kind of forward thrust. Well, there just isn't. And don't be fooled by sites that look very authoritative. Some of them, I'm afraid, even education sites, which mention a forward force. If you want to get the truth, check out the websites by NASA. They get it right. So we have the three forces: gravity, lift and drag. We can't do very much about gravity. That's going to be there whatever we do. But we can play with the lift and the drag. And so we're going to see how to experiment with our glider to make those do the best that we can. Before you actually throw the plane, you might want to check just how the wings have been folded out. The wings on this aeroplane, the wings on this glider, are folded slightly upwards from the body as opposed to downwards. You don't really want the wings to be downwards like that. You want them to be very slightly upwards. Now, when you come to throw the plane, what happens very often is that the plane goes into what we call a stall. In other words, the plane goes up like that and then dives back down again. The reason, as the aeroplane's going along, if there's a lot of lift, it goes further and further up, and then when it gets up like that, there isn't any lift, and it just drops back again. We would really like our glider to go along nice and steadily like that, just gradually losing height, but not going into a stall. There are two things we could think about for the stall to begin with. One is how fast you throw the aeroplane. If you throw the glider quickly, you will get more lift, and it's more likely to go up into the stall. So try how fast you launch the aeroplane, and if you launch it more slowly, it may not stall. The other thing we could look at is how big the wings are, because the stall is happening because there is a lot of lift and it's going up into the stall. If we had less wing surface, then it would be less likely to stall. So we could fold the wings to be a little bit smaller, and in fact we could gain a bit of stabilisation probably by doing it. Look, we could do this. If I fold the wings in half again, we could make the wings smaller by folding the end up like that, and do exactly the same to the other side. So we turn it over and make sure the two sides are the same. And now, when we open the wings out, we've got an upright bit. And so the wings now are smaller because there are these little stabilising edges to them. And we could change the sizes of those. We could make them bigger or smaller until we had the aeroplane flying in the way that we wanted to. So there's a first way to experiment. How fast you throw the aeroplane, and can you fold the ends of the wings up to make stabilisers and make less wing area, and does that help your aeroplane to glide nicely? Well, I'm hoping that that will give you an interesting time experimenting with a simple glider. There is another thing that we could do though to adjust the way that the plane works. We could make little flaps at the back of the wings like this. If we fold the wings back down again, we could cut flaps at the back. Again, it would be a good idea to try and make them the same on both wings, so that when we open the wings out again, there are flaps here that we could bend up like that. Now, bending the flaps up like that will tend to make the nose of the aeroplane lift, and if we put the flaps down the other way, it will tend to make the nose go down. So you can play with these flaps. You probably don't want to make them very steep, just adjust them very slightly to see how that affects the glide of the aeroplane. And of course one thing you could do is put the flap up one side and down the other side, and then the aeroplane will go along spinning round and round as it goes. So have a little experiment with some flaps at the back of the aeroplane as well as the other things that we've talked about. Remember, with the flaps, as with the other changes, the speed that you launch the aeroplane at will make a difference to what happens too. And then we'll have a look at whether we can make a simple improvement to the whole design of the aeroplane. After we've folded the paper in half to get the fold down the middle, we fold into that middle fold to make the slightly pointed end in the way that we did before, and we try to make that the same on both sides. Now, instead of folding in the way that we did last time, we take this whole section and fold it back like that. So where we've made this, we're going to fold that whole pointed front part backwards like that. So you can see what we've done there. That's been folded back. We've still got the fold in the middle now. I'll just reinforce that fold by going over it again. And now this time we do the same thing again. And fold into the middle like that. And like that. Now we want to try and get those two folds the same, which I didn't quite have there. There we are. That's better. So we folded down the ends, we folded that across, and then we folded across again. And when we fold this in half, we can now make the wings. And we want the two wings to be the same. So we can fold like that. And like that, matching these two sides up against each other as we do it. There's quite a bit of paper to fold, which is why this has become a little bit more tricky. And when we've done that, we can also put the stabilisers. That's the edges of the wings. And if we open out, we've got a plane like that. We could still make the flaps at the end. We could still adjust the amount of wing that we've got by changing the amount of the stabilisers. And that, I think, is a bit of an improvement on the plane that we made in the first place. If you're trying to make a prize-winning aeroplane, then you would need to have a look at the internet. There are some people who've spent a lot of time trying to improve paper gliders to make them as good as possible. And so you could have a look and see what you can find there as well. Now we come to helicopters. This is a picture of the seeds that come on a maple tree. And you've probably seen something similar on a sycamore tree or even on an ash tree. And when the seeds are ready, they drop off and they whirl down like little helicopters as they go down towards the ground, and they can fly a little distance away from the tree to plant themselves. Well, we can make something like that out of paper. You'll need a sheet of A4 paper. A4 paper, that's the size that we usually use in our computer printers. You commonly buy it in packs in the supermarket as well. So you'll need a sheet of that, and then this is what you do. We need to cut the paper into eighths. Now watch out, because the last of these folds isn't quite in the direction that you would probably expect it to be. So I fold the paper in half, and we're going to cut that. And then we fold one of those halves in half again. So that will get us into quarters. And we'll cut that. And then we fold one of those quarters into half again. Now this is the one that's a little bit unexpected because it's that way. It's a long ways fold on this last one. And that will be 1/8. of the sheet, and so we can cut that. And it's one of these pieces that we're going to make into the helicopter. Now I've marked one of them up in the way that we need to do it. So you can see I've measured 6 centimetres from one end and drawn a line across, and I've measured 7 centimetres from the other end and drawn a line across. I've also folded this in half to make a middle fold just to see where it was. So I folded it in half and I've made a line along the fold, the 6 centimetre side, to there. I've marked on 2 more lines. These are each 1.5 centimetres from the edge. So 1.5 centimetres from that edge, and I've drawn a line down there. 1.5 centimetres from that edge, and I've drawn a line down there. Once you've done that, there are some cuts to be made. We need to cut along that 6 centimetre line. So we cut that one, just the 6 centimetres, which goes as far as there. And then we need to cut along these lines, but we don't want to cut that middle bit. We only cut this section and that section. So I'm going to cut there just that amount, and on the other side do the same thing again, just cut that amount like that. So I've got 2 pieces here because that's been cut, and I've got a piece and a piece. The middle bit hasn't been cut. We're going to fold those 2 pieces in like that. And then you can fold this end piece, this kind of stalk that we've made, you can fold up like that. It doesn't matter exactly how far you fold this up. You can see what I've done, but it doesn't matter. We're folding it enough to make a place to grip a paper clip. So the paper clip just holds that. These 2 pieces are going to be the blades of the helicopter. So we fold one way and one the other way, then level them up, and we've got the helicopter. Here we are with the helicopter. Now I can't really try this in front of the camera, but you can go and try this. If you drop it, you should find that it works like the maple seed. As it goes down, it will spin round and round. Many people find a place to drop these over their stairs. If you live in a bungalow, of course, that won't be so good for you. So you need to find somewhere fairly high to drop it. And as you drop it, it should go round and round like the ash seed or the sycamore seed or the maple seed as it falls. And finally, we come to the ice cream, the in-flight snack. But before we actually make that, I need to show you something about ice and salt. I've got here some ice in a beaker and it's melting. There's a thermometer in the ice and you can see the reading here says 0, that's 0 degrees Celsius. Now what I want to show you is what happens if I sprinkle salt on the ice. Now many people will expect, quite rightly, that the salt starts to make the ice melt. But it also does something else. If we start prodding that about a bit so that a lot of the ice gets some salt onto it, this temperature, there's a little dash there, that is minus. The temperature in here isn't 0 degrees Celsius anymore. It's -8, -9, -10, And if I keep adding some -11, if I keep adding salt to this, the salt does melt the ice, it's true, but it also makes the temperature go down. And that temperature can go down as far as about -18 degrees Celsius. And we're going to use that idea to help us to make some ice cream. To make our in-flight snack of ice cream, you're going to need the following things. You will need a bowl, quite a large bowl, and you'll need a lot of crushed ice. I've only put a little bit in here, I'm going to need a lot more. So you will need some crushed ice. You will need some kind of tin. The best thing we find to use is an empty fruit or vegetable tin, as long as it's clean inside and as long as there aren't any sharp edges around the top. So I'm using that tin. That's to make the ice cream in. You're going to need some salt to make the ice go really cold. You'll need something to stir this with. Now, a spoon is probably not the best thing. These kind of stick stirrers seem to be the best thing because they get into the corners of the tin. So some kind of stirrer that will get into the corners, and you don't want it to be made of metal, because if it's made of metal, you'll be conducting heat from your hand into the ice cream you're trying to make, and that won't help you to make it. You'll probably want to have a bit of sugar, and we're using 1/3 of a cup of milk. I won't show you that, but you'll see it in a minute. 1/3 of a cup of milk. If you use more, this will take longer and become harder, and it's surprising how much 1/3 of a cup makes. The milk we're using is semi-skimmed. That we find works. I think I wouldn't suggest using skimmed milk, but full cream milk I expect would be fine. And we've got a bit of colouring. I'm going to make pink ice cream, and also a little bit of flavouring. I've got some vanilla essence to go in. So that means we're ready to start trying to make this. So in our bowl, we've got some ice. That's where the tin is going to go, and we're going to try and pack that round with more crushed ice. Now, crushed ice might be a problem. It could be that you've got an ice maker and crushed ice is what comes out of it. Otherwise, you may be making ice cubes, and if you're making ice cubes, you might want to crush them up a bit, because the small pieces will work rather better than large ice lumps. The only thing is, when it comes to crushing up ice, you need to be aware that ice is hard, and so if you crush it, you're probably going to be hitting it against something, and there's a danger of damaging whatever you hit it against. I've crushed this by wrapping it up in plastic and then hitting it sort of firmly with a wooden mallet. But be careful what you hit it against. If you do that, for example, on a kitchen surface, you may damage the surface underneath as you're hitting the hard ice. You may also make marks in the wooden mallet, I might say. So be a little bit careful how you crush the ice and what you crush it against. So that's one warning. The milk that we're going to use goes into the tin. So that's in there. We're going to add some sugar to that. Don't go berserk on the sugar, because the more sugar you add, the harder this will be to turn into ice cream. So you may want to add some sugar, but just remember, the more you add, the harder this will become to work. I'm going to add a little bit of colouring. If I can just manage to get a drop or two, it's already all over my fingers, which reminds me, by the way, before I started this, I did also wash my hands and make sure everything I was using here was clean. You didn't see that, but I promise you that did happen. And a little bit of vanilla essence. I guess if you had strawberry, that would go with the pink, but a little bit of vanilla. Now what we're going to do is stir. That's quite a violent pink, but never mind. And we're going to be adding salt to the ice to make it go cold. So I've got a separate spoon for this, and beware when you add the salt, you do not want the salt to go in the tin where the ice cream is. Salty ice cream is universally declared to be not very good. So get the salt in the ice, and then you can push that down a bit. Now you're going to need to hold the tin when you're doing things here. I'm just using the tip of my fingers against the top of the tin, and remember we made sure that the top of the tin wasn't sharp. Something you might want to notice, by the way, I did put a clock here, and when we started I think the clock was reading just before 9:15. That's nothing to do with actually what the time is now, but it will tell you something about how long this stirring takes. Now I don't really know how cold the ice is either. All I know is that I need to add quite a bit of salt to this. And once I've got the salt, a bit of stirring round so the ice and the salt get mixed together. Remember, taking great care to keep the salt out of the ice. Do bear in mind, this ice could be going down to a temperature as low as -18 degrees Celsius, and you know what it's like if you pick out something from the freezer that's very cold. Now, you wouldn't want your fingers to get stuck to it or get made too cold by it. So beware, this ice mix with the salt in it can be very cold. So a lot of stirring, and with the stick getting into the corners. Good things come to those who wait, so this is going to take a lot of stirring. You can see now how long I've been stirring this for, and if you look inside the tin, you can also see that I'm getting a soft scoop pink ice cream in there. So I'm going to give that a try. Remember, by the way, I only put a bare teaspoon of sugar into that. If I put more, I would be waiting a lot longer, and in fact I could have trouble making it set at all. As it is, let's see what our soft scoop ice cream is like. Here's my tin, and let's see what we have there. Ice cream. Yeah, slightly peculiar that it's pink and at the same time vanilla, but I dare say you'll manage to make what you want. So have a nice time with that. Goodbye.